We are here at the Cannes Festival of Creativity. I'm joined by Anton Vincent, the President of North America and Mars Wrigley. I'm Julia Hammond, President of Stagwell Global, and we're catching you right off stage. Right off stage, yeah. And giving a bit of a behind-the-scenes view on all things Cannes.
Yes, no,
excellent.
Exciting.
Well, so tell us, so talk to me about your on-stage moment. What was that like for you? What was the real message you wanted to get across?
Well, there's a couple things. First of all, BECCA is a new organization, relatively new. We're a little over a year old, and we just had the opportunity to have somewhat of a coming out party in terms of making sure people knew what BECCA was, what we were about, and then expose them to some of the founders, along with Jerry DeVard. So I think it was a very exciting opportunity to sort of tell our story, to give some understanding around who's involved, and just our level of commitment and community around making sure that we are diversifying marketing leadership around the world. And so that's been really fantastic for us to be able to do that and to be able to have and bring some of our younger marketers along with us as well. So it's really been fantastic.
So you were a founding member of BECCA.
Yes.
You've left that out. So come on.
I was a founding
member. Take a little, you know.
A little bit, yeah.
So talk to me. What was your proudest moment thus far of starting this organization?
I think our proudest moment was that we did this in the middle of COVID, and I would say we all got together. We almost celebrated a year in New York. So it was about December of 21, just seeing each other. And I just think the organization in which we did, the amount of people, and what, sort of natural camaraderie. I mean, some of us knew each other, but we all didn't know each other. And I would just sort of say the commitment, the single commitment that now 33 of us have towards the mission, the goal, and the purpose, and just seeing the action and the activity and the programming that has come off of that. It's real, it's something that's going to stick, and now people are starting to notice, which is really good. And so that means that we can actually have traction in terms of what we're trying to get done, and do it in a way that's transparent, that's open, and we're having people, really knocking down our doors to sort of join us in our efforts as well.
Well, so talk to me about how you've been able to bring some of that into what you do at Mars Wrigley.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of things. I think part of being a member is that, look, I have to be in accordance with the purpose and what we're doing, and so, we have been supporting and making sure that we have our own Mars associates participating in BECCA activities. We've been a part of actually building the BECCA playbook as well, which is just outstanding content for people who understand marketing, want to have a career in marketing, want to have a career in leading marketing organizations as well. You probably have some of the most powerful CMOs across industries that are together sharing expertise and making sure that we're visible, here to help, and doing it in a very controlled, planned, and innovative manner, I think.
Okay, yeah, and you founded this during COVID.
During COVID, yeah.
Lots of adversity. Talk to me about, let's just pivot over to that theme, because I think every marketer right now is talking about the adversity, the need to kind of change course, transform the way that they're doing things going into COVID. Well, now we're kind of coming out of it. So we're reaching another pivot moment. How are you thinking about that inside of Mars?
Well, I think about it a couple of ways. I think anybody that's been around brands in the last couple of years, that we've learned things about our brands, we've learned things about our businesses, we've learned things about our people, about our talent. And so, look, if you have new knowledge in your mind and your insights have been expanded, you have to go and apply them in a very different way. And so I think we understood that our brands matter, that they really matter in people's lives, regardless of what industry you're in. I think it's great. I think we learned that our talent really has a value system now that they want to exercise, because all of us have actually found, all right, look, I understand what's really valuable in life now when I have certain parts of it I didn't have access to for over 2 years, and how do I incorporate that in my life as an individual, as a leader, but also how are our consumers incorporating that, and what does that mean for us as marketing professionals? We're trying to understand our consumers, we're trying to be the tip of the spear with our consumers, in some ways guide our consumers down a path as well. So I think it's just probably integrating all those insights. And then of course on the back end of it, we had some discussion around back to office. What does that mean, particularly for younger generations, and how do we sort of build our employer propositions in a way that still gets the business done, but still attracts talent in a way that we hope that is differential, and hopefully bring them to a culture that we think is differential as well. And so there's just a lot of considerations, a lot of intention, hopefully some innovation. But at the end of the day, our objectives are our objectives, but we have to do them in very different, I would say, probably more informed ways now that we had versus COVID.
In your business, you really don't control that last mile. So knowing that behaviors are changing in terms of purchase, how are you thinking about owning all of these connected consumer touch points and experiences?
Yeah, well, safe to say that we're thinking more about it these days.
Sure.
But particularly we started talking about the last mile piece, because I think that's the one thing that just rose in COVID. Now, we knew it was coming, we saw it coming, we know the players in the space as well, but now the necessity was very clear in COVID. And so now that people are actually getting back to having some kind of normal mobility pattern, so what does that mean? What roles do they play in our lives? And so I'll say the good thing is that we developed a lot of deep connections, particularly with the last mile folks, but also just making sure we have a better sense around when do our consumers want to activate a last mile service and when they want to have more of a traditional experience. And how do we sort of place ourselves, how do we place our brands, how do we place our offerings wherever they decide to consume or however they decide to transact. It's very, very important for us as well. So I think we got much more sophisticated around that. I think the data environment itself has become a little more richer. And I think for marketers, particularly moving forward, just being able to connect those data points in a way that makes sense, and understanding what is new behavior and what is what I call reactive behavior. I mean, we reacted in COVID because we had to. We all learned how to do that for a couple of years. Now we're on the backside of it. What does a new environment look like? What does a new regime look like? What does a new norm look like in the consumer's mind? So we're putting together really deep studies around what does that look like, how that's changing, because we're getting further out from COVID. All right, are we normalizing or are we creating a new norm? How do we help to codify that new norm? Obviously, with a lot of our products being at the foundation of it as well. So it's quite scientific.
Yeah.
It's quite robust, I would say, from that perspective, and it helps us just to be at the tip of the spear as marketing and marketing leaders.
So as you're talking, I know earlier you mentioned being consumer obsessed.
Yes,
That's something we were
absolutely.
talking about,
Yes.
outside,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So as you're thinking about consumer obsession, and clearly you're doing a lot of research and trying to figure out like how do we evolve and serve our customers, our consumers in a more proactive way, is what it sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how does DE&I and inclusivity overall work into the way that you're thinking of consumer obsession?
Well, I think it's at the foundation of it, because our consumers, regardless of what part of the world you're in, are diversifying in every sense of the word. And so just part of that is a concept. Another part is that, no, it's actually real. And there's difference in that. There's good difference in that. There's inclusion in that. And how do you start to make sure your brands, especially the big iconic brands that, people like Mars, Wrigley sort of tend to market, how do they reflect that? How do they invite that? And how do they leverage from that as well? And so just making sure that becomes not something to the side, but something that is foundational with that as well. Now, while I'm responsible for North America, but I also manage brands that span the globe, right? And so what DE&I means in North America may mean something very different in China, in the Middle East, in Africa. And so it's just making sure that we have, in our case, a global concept around what that is, and how do we sort of localize what that concept means, and how do we make sure that our brands are really talking in a voice that makes sense and that is inviting for as wide a swath as consumers as possible.
So you're hitting on something that I keep hearing over and over again from some of the clients that I spend time with. How do you strike the right balance between building globally coherent brands and finding real, authentic, local relevance? We're seeing this fragmentation coming through of creators coming in from all over the world who are really representative of authentic local voices. How do you find the right balance of that inside of your businesses overall?
Yeah, I think it's a couple of ways, and I think there's two sides of it. So part of it is the creative side. The other part of it is the organization. How does the organization work globally? Big global brands, make sure there's some level of consistency, but still making sure you're getting to the local flavor. And then, like you said, how do we sort of invite the creative community that has not only just difference and diversity, but different ways to connect with consumers, today as well. So I think we do it a couple of ways. One, for big global brands, we want to make sure that we understand those brands to a T at the very highest conceptual level, because that candidly around the globe, that really should be consistent. Now, how we activate against that, how do we start to incorporate local preferences? Then our local teams have to be very persistent against that. So part of it is really having that T around global and local, and making sure what is something that's unassailable, I don't care where you're in the world, and what are things that have to be adaptable in that global market. So I would say that's the manufacturer, the brand owner side of it as well. Now, when you start getting to how do you start to build narrative and creative that can go and drive that, and making sure you're bringing in, again, a more diverse group of not just suppliers, but ideas. It's like, yes, we all got big budgets and can do whatever we want to do with these brands, at least for large companies. But also, look, we got to be new, we got to be fresh, we got to be multi-generational, because they consume data and consume media in very different ways. And so I think it forces us to be at places like Cannes so that we can learn, we can understand what's happening around the world, and then making sure, again, going back to being consumer obsessed, learn about them, because consumers are different and they change.
Yeah.
So it's not like, all right, I got one set of foundational information and I'm done. It's like, no, there's evolution in those spaces as well. So, for us, it always starts with, we're about the consumer, that's who pays us. We also have to have data that turns into information, that turns into insight, and then we got to have a way to apply that and to build creativity that goes and drives those narratives as well. And so I think that part of our profession doesn't change. How we apply it and how do we open up the funnel in different ways and different mechanisms, I think, is what this creative community is really about.
Okay, so you touched on this moving target of a consumer, right? Gen Z.
Yeah.
Everybody's talking about it this week. Basically, like, Cannes is like, how do we figure out Gen Z? What do we do with Gen Z? Like, that's all. Like, that is the theme throughout. So, how are you guys thinking about Gen Z? What are you doing?
I'll give you a personal experience. And I'll just sort of get. So for us, look, Gen Z is a big cohort, biggest one we've seen in a very long time. And certainly, what I would say is, I think they come to a consumer marketplace with a value system. I would say they understand their value system and they want to apply their value system, right? Much more so than other generations. I mean, to small things. An M&M's bag of peanut M&M's. It's like, all right, where was it made? So look, we're answering these questions, right? We got to make sure we have great answers, authentic answers to those questions. So I would say just the connection with their personal value system is as strong as I've seen any cohort, right? In its earliest stage, right? And I think for me, I have three Gen Zs at home, so I have a petri dish around what they're thinking. And I would say just the nature of conversation between Gen Z, I would say, and the general adult population is just very interesting. And so I think being able to understand that, absorb that, push and question, and this is an N of 3, but it does give you some insight around what's important to them, how they want to interact, the understanding of what does adulthood mean, and how do I assert myself in a very authentic way as I become adults and sort of do the adulting thing, right? Which is, it's a very present exercise with them, and I think they bring that to a consuming activity and a choice-making activity as well.
So it's really all about finding those shared values.
Find those shared values. Find those shared values. Again, I believe for this generation, it is much more present for them than it certainly was for me when I was sort of those ages as well. And so, just as marketers, we have to understand that, and we have to connect with them at those levels, even though we're still selling A, B, and Y, A, B, and C product or service. But it means a lot. A purchase is not just a purchase; it's something more.
You're voting with your wallet.
You're voting with your wallet, and you're voting with your value system, right? And that means something to them. And in their case, we're in a social media ecosystem where it's like, all right, I'm making a choice, and then I'm going to tell everybody what I'm doing. So you better be good, because in many cases, your brand choice is representing who they are. That's different. It's a very different paradigm versus just, no, there's function, there's benefit, there's satisfaction. We're like, no, this is me. I'm putting my name to this and I'm attaching myself and I'm sharing it with the world.
It's almost like fashion.
Yeah, almost like fashion. I mean, almost, we used to call it badge brands and all that kind of stuff. But the badge mentality, I think, connects to a value system. And I think that's what's different about this cohort. And I just think as marketers, we really have to understand it's not just a simple transaction or a simple purchase. It means more. Even the smallest thing, even the most inexpensive thing means something.
Well, Anton, this is an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for making the time
Thank you for having me.
And for sharing out our audience with our Stagwell Speakers Lounge. Please tune into the LinkedIn channel. Go to stagwellglobal.com for more Cannes coverage. Thank you for spending the time with us today.